Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Madeline and this is Made with Books. And today I'm gonna talk about the reading I did in the second half of March. So I've read 6 more books in March, and I'm not gonna talk about a lot of them in detail here. I will talk about one book in another video, and some of them I'm just gonna cover quickly, and then I have one where I want to talk a little bit more about it. So the first book I finished, finally, and I've been reading this one forever, even though I haven't really talked about it on this channel yet, the complete Sonnets by William Shakespeare. I haven't read all his other poetry that is in this edition, but I've finished reading all the sonnets, and it took me 2 years. It was just an intense reading experience, I guess, in a sense, if you will. They're very dense, they're really good, I enjoyed them for the most part, but it just took me a long time to read them. I think it makes sense, I will say that, to read them closer together, because a lot of them are connected and you have ideas and themes that run through series of the sonnets, and you have them grouped like that. So I read the Oxford edition, and if you want to have a lot of background when reading Shakespeare's sonnets, I would recommend this edition. So the way it's set up is that you have a sonnet on one page, and then on the other side you have the commentary on the sonnet. So that gives a lot of explanations and details, and some of these I didn't necessarily need, but sometimes it was helpful, and sometimes it was passages where I didn't even think I would need it, but the explanations just gave me extra information. It can get a bit overwhelming though sometimes with the comment on the sonnet, so if you can see it over here, the secondary text kind of has taken over the page, and the sonnet is almost engulfed by it, if you will. So if you don't like that, if you just want to read the poems on their own, you can absolutely do that, I think, and that would be fine too. But I just wanted to have some extra information. There was also an introduction in this, and there was some additional information on the sonnets, and I thought that was really helpful. I will read one sonnet for the Poetry Newbie tag that I think fits with that tag, and yeah, I think I'm just gonna, that's all I'm gonna say, because some of these I've read, as I said, 2 years ago, so I think I will definitely reread those in the future, all of them, but for now I think I'm gonna turn to Shakespeare's plays again and take a break from his poetry. And then, which was kind of funny, Daniel gifted me a book for International Women's Day, and I was asking him, because I didn't know what book it was until I unwrapped it, if it was a feminist one. He was like, and it isn't really, it's a romance novel, and it's China Rich Girlfriend, so the sequel to Crazy Rich Asians. So I read Crazy Rich Asians in February, and I really enjoyed that, and I'm sad to say that the sequel doesn't live up to the first book. You again follow all these different characters, so Rachel and Nick, our main, well, not even our main couple. You have several storylines that are central to the books. You have Astrid, who is Nick's cousin, and her husband, who experience marriage difficulties, and you have a host of other characters. And these are written like way over the top, and you have, as the title suggests, with the first one, Crazy Rich Asians. You have crazy rich people in a sphere that most of us will never experience or know about. And I don't know, maybe because I read them so close together, but I found the frequent mentioning of all the products and things that they consume, and the exclusive places and restaurants and spas they go to, a bit more tedious in this and a bit more tiring. And I don't know, not always necessary for the storyline. I mean, I get that Kevin Kwan wants to show us this over-the-top lifestyle, and it's part of the fun of reading these is to like be shocked all the time about it, but it was a bit much. So in this storyline we follow Rachel, who's trying to find out about who her father was, and tries to find him. And That's all I'm gonna say, because otherwise I'm gonna give away too many spoilers there, especially if you haven't read the first one. I will say they are quite dramatic in the storylines, and you have these gasp, shocking moments. But at the end of the story here, there's a plot twist happening, and things are getting to be very dramatic very quickly. Of course, you already have to suspend your disbelief for this series to a certain extent, but that was just a bit too much for me, and I didn't always find it plausible the way some of the characters acted and developed throughout the story. I still enjoyed this, and I will continue the series. It's a light, fun read. I didn't hate this or anything, but it was just not nearly as good as the first one, but I still enjoyed it. And yeah, we'll continue on with the series at some point, finish the trilogy, and let you know what I think. Although I've seen Jean from Bookish Thoughts say that the third one is the worst, so we'll see how that goes. And then the next book I listened to on audiobook, and that was Vox by Christina Dalcher. And I'm sorry to say I did not enjoy this at all. And I didn't have super high hopes for it, but I had sort of limited hopes for it. So what this novel is about is, it's a dystopian novel. It's set in the not too distant future, and very quickly things have changed. It's set in the US, and women are no longer allowed to talk freely. They all wear this metallic bracelet that gives them electric shock waves whenever they exceed their daily word quota of only 100 words. And I've seen people research this, and apparently women talk up to 20,000 words on average per day, so you can see how that would change things very drastically. We experienced the story through the perspective of a former female professor who was researching aphasia of all things, and how she experiences this new life. And I thought this novel had a lot of great potential. So of course the idea for the story I think is amazing. It's a really interesting concept, and you can have a lot of fun with it, not only on the story level but also on the level of form, especially since you're getting it from the perspective of the protagonist. So you could have done things, because she tells you the story of, you know, having clipped short sentences, or getting the story day by day only in 100 words, which I think would have been really cool stylistically. But the author, she didn't go for that, but that's alright. That's her choice, I guess. But even then, you have all these good setups for the story. So she's married, and her husband seems to sort of be complacent, and he sort of has settled in this new way that society works, and yes, he's not quite happy about it, but what can he do? And he actually works for the government, so he sort of supports the system, even though he's not a really great advocate of it. And then you have the children of the family, and you have the oldest son, and he really drinks in this new ideology that is now being pushed in the schools as well, about, you know, how men are superior, how women are supposed to stay at home, how they're not supposed to talk so much but have children and stuff like that. So very traditional values that are being pushed. And her son makes a choice more or less early in the novel that has very drastic consequences. And you really see the alienation between mother and son, and how she almost hates her own son, or actually does hate him to some extent. And then you have the little girl that she has, that is growing up in this society, and that is probably not going to remember a time when she was allowed to talk more. And of course they are like trying to reward her for not talking, so she doesn't get to the 100-word limit and gets electrical shocks. So you have all these interesting setups, and yet I think the story never really gets off. For one thing, what really bugged me is you have this protagonist who's like looking back on her college time, and she had this really feminist, very stereotypical feminist, by the way, friend who was fighting and trying to get things to change. And she keeps going back and thinking, oh, if I only had gone to those protests, maybe things would be different. And all these other people went to the protests, and it's like, you know what? You wouldn't have changed that. You wouldn't have changed the impact of society. And it's just very obvious that the author wants to drill home the message of, you know, you need to speak up now or it's going to be too late. And the author is just not very subtle with the messages that she put into this novel. So you get very heavy, obvious references to Donald Trump. You get only one sort of depiction of religion as this super hardcore thing where very traditional family roles are being pushed, and that is not accepting of anything else. And I know that there are these hardcore religious people out there, but I don't think that's the majority of religious people, and there's never really a different way of religion being depicted in the novel. I mean, I'm not religious myself, but that still bugged me. You have only this priest who is now this prominent figure and who's like pushing all these very, very conservative views, and who's a really unlikable character. And I mean, not everybody who's religious is like that, and I thought that was very black and white in the novel. And another thing that was potentially interesting was that the protagonist actually had an affair while she was married with a colleague of hers. But he's Italian, and then you have all these stereotypes. And I don't know if it was the audio narration and the audio narrator's choice, but then he has this really stereotypical Italian accent, and she has another Asian colleague who has like this weird accent, and that really annoyed me. And I don't know if that is also in the book or if it's just in the audio version, so if somebody knows that, please let me know. But then the Italian obviously plays the mandolin, because I'm assuming the author at some point has seen Corelli's mandolin, and it was just very stereotypical in that sense, and I really didn't enjoy that. And the story in the end wraps up really rather rapidly and in a way very conveniently, and then at the same time some things that happen are just not addressed, or the consequences are not even taken into account. So it just felt rushed and not like properly developed. And then one more thing that bugged me was that, you know, the narrator, this woman, she's always about like protecting her daughter and everything. She never takes into consideration that she needs to protect her sons from the system. So she very much tells you that, oh, her sons are fine and her husband's fine and all the men are fine. But I don't think in a system like that all the men would be fine, and I don't think that is a really complex approach. And of course you have men that are against the system in this story, but it just didn't feel fully developed, and a lot of the characters seemed very stereotypical, and you have these shocking moments and surprises, but it's sort of like, I don't know, I couldn't really care for any of these characters, and the story just fell very flat for me. It felt very flat for me, and just fell really short of its potential. So unfortunately I cannot recommend that one. And then the next thing I read was On Cats by Charles Bukowski, and I decided to make a separate video about this, not because I have super much to say about it content-wise, but because I want to read a few of the poems in here, and that would take longer, and yeah, so I'll just make a separate video on this. And then for my 30 books until I'm 30 years old project, I read Heinrich von Ofterdingen by Novalis, and this is a German classic from the Romantic period, and I hated this. This was really awful. I'm happy I read it because it's such a big classic, but from today's perspective, like, today this wouldn't get published. This is really trivial and trite, and you have things that today you would call insta-love, and I didn't enjoy a lot of it. So you have the story of the title figure, Heinrich von Ofterdingen, and it's sort of like a coming-of-age story. He takes this journey from his hometown and travels to another story where he falls in love with a young woman immediately, and they are basically, I think they're engaged either the same evening or the next day and then get married. So that was kind of ridiculous. And you have this very obnoxious choice in language, them describing their love at each other, that is really like angsty teenage stuff that I don't want to read about, you know, like you don't need to put that into and call it great literature, it just isn't. I don't know. Novalis didn't get to finish this because he died, and I mean, I know it's harsh to say, but I'm kind of happy this wasn't any longer. Like, this is a short book, but it still took me a really long time to read this. It was just painful, and I read 3 of the pages where Heinrich and, oh god, what was, see, I can't even remember her name, the woman that he's in love with. Well, they exchanged these love vows about how much they love each other, and I had to read those pages out loud to Daniel because they were so obnoxious I wouldn't have made it through them otherwise. So yeah, sorry, this was kind of harsh, but I would classify this as a classic you can skip. And that you don't need to read. I mean, I know what the blue flower is everybody talks about, so he has this dream vision in the beginning where the blue flower shows up, and that has become like a symbol for romantic literature in Germany. There were a few things that I liked though, so I will mention those. The standpoint the narrator took in this at some points, which was very pacifist and, you know, anti-war, which positively surprised me for just the time that this was written in. And yeah, that's all I have for this. Don't read it. Just don't do that to yourself. And then the last book I read is this tiny pamphlet by Stéphane Hessel, if I said that correctly. He's French, so I hope I didn't just butcher his name. And I read this in German, and I think the English translation is Get Angry, but I will look it up and link it down below with all the other titles if you want to find out more about any of the books that I talked about. And he wrote this when he was 93 years old, and he was one of the people that worked on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, so a really important figure in the 20th century. And he talks in this tiny book about how we are supposed to get angry about political injustices, and at the same time how today, because things have become more complicated and multi-layered, it's harder to get angry. So he talks about how during World War II it was very easy for him to get angry about the circumstances and to know who the bad guy was and to know what to do about it and take action. And that today it is not quite as easy to get angry, but that it's still important, that there are still things that are not right in this society, and he addresses problems like the rich becoming richer and the poor becoming poorer and social injustices. And yeah, he just talks about how we as a people have to stay involved and active and politically aware to make a difference. So it's just a call for action and for staying politically engaged and active and aware of the world around you, which is nice. It's a nice reminder. I mean, this wasn't anything groundbreaking, although it was an important text as far as I understand when it came out in 2000, I think 11. So yeah, this edition came out in 2011, and then the French original was published in 2010. So yeah, it was just like a nice little reminder. And that's all I have on this, really. So those were all the books I read in March. Let me know if you've read any of these books or are interested now that I've talked about them, although I don't think there was a big favorite in here that I would have encouraged. I mean, I'm happy I read the Sonnets and I enjoyed those. That's probably the best thing out of the books that I just talked about that I've read. And I will see you next time. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys!